We're travelling the length of Britain to see some truly awe-inspiring restoration work. We start at the Raymond Brown Quarry Project's Vinegar Quarry in Wareham in Dorset. This quarry sits alongside the Dorset Heathland Special Protection Area and other sites of special scientific interest. 8 hectares of land, once bare soil and overburdened moulds, have been carefully restored. It's been colonised by birch, rhododendron, gorse, heather and pine, creating lowland acid grassland and heathland. Reptiles like sand lizard and smooth snake are thriving along with birds including the nightjar, the Dartford warbler and woodlark. The rare silver-studded blue butterfly is now flying at Vinegar amongst rare protected flowers and plants, including the pennyroyal. The judges think this is an interesting experiment in translocating a protected plant species which, although still in its early stages, appears to be successful.
Pennyroyal in this area is reasonably common, but UK-wide and EU-wide it's particularly rare, particularly in its natural habitat. So we had a requirement to find a receptor site to translocate the pennyroyal to, and the pennyroyal is quite particular about areas that it will want to grow in. It likes its feet wet, but on the other hand not too wet. So we purposely created scrapes and ponds, some of which are ephemeral. The water bodies come and go throughout the year. Some ponds are permanent. And we purposely placed the pennyroyal around those ponds in areas that we thought they would take to.
Vinegar Quarry is now a vital link in a 5-mile-long chain of biodiversity across 250 hectares of beautiful Dorset. Our next stop is Tarmack's Broom Quarry in Biggleswade in Bedfordshire, where a former sand and gravel quarry has been restored to a mix of farmland, wetlands, woodland and lakes. A cluster of fishing and conservation lakes have been created with islands and wildlife-friendly shallow margins on the shoreline. Reed beds and wet woodland have been added, ideal habitat for waders, invertebrates and amphibians. Red clover and grassland are helping to improve soil quality, and Dexter cattle are adding some vital organic matter. Hedgerows, woodland and a wildflower meadow are all contributing to make Broom a site especially significant for farmland birds, with 117 different species recorded on site, including lapwing, little plovers and redshank. Local people can learn about Broom's wildlife and mineral history and enjoy the beautiful landscape. According to the judges, this is a massive transformation on what was originally typical, uninteresting agricultural land. They think this is of great value to both the community and to wildlife.
We have reinstated 10 kilometers of footpaths and bridleways for the public to enjoy, and we have also installed some information boards to provide an educational resource for the local community about the wildlife of the site, but also about its mineral extraction and restoration. One of the keys of the success of the restoration here is that the site itself is quite big, so that means that the amount of habitats that we have created is quite significant for the local wildlife to colonize this area. We have created here 86 hectares of UK priority habitats.
Shorncote Quarry, run by HANSON, sits in glorious Gloucestershire, and the site has a 70-year history of mineral extraction. Since the mid-1990s, extensive restoration work has been taking place, and the 100-hectare gravel pit has been restored to create shallow lakes, woodland, grassland and reed beds. Native trees have been planted on silt lagoons, with coppicing and pollarding encouraging wildlife. Willow, planted on the lake margins 20 years ago, has been harvested to make traditional English willow cricket bats.
We planted 50 willows in the early 1990s and we harvested them a few years ago to generate £10,000 of useful income that's been put back into the restoration fund.
Butterflies love the wildflowers, while the mature vegetation is favoured by dragonflies and the rare emerald damselfly. The great crested newt has been seen for the first time at Shorncote, and stoneworts are growing in the clean groundwater. Winter birds are monitored and the mysterious boom of the bittern has been heard in the reed beds. And birds aren't the only visitors to Shorncote. Local angling clubs and a scout troop are now using the mature lakes. The judges were particularly impressed by the open areas or scrapes between the lakes and around their edges and the way they're developing naturally. They think there's a sound framework here for the continuing development of wildlife in the years ahead.
And I think it just goes to show how a succession of all the different professionals involved, from the quarry managers over the years, the landscape architects and designers, the ecologists who've advised us, and through to the earthworks contractors, have all had a hand in achieving this very successful site restoration.
We're in Scotland next, at Loudon Hill, Tarmac's former sand and gravel quarry in East Ayrshire. This sits near the site of the historic battle between the English and the Scots, led by Robert the Bruce. Minerals had been worked here since the 1930s, and the battle for the quarry was to restore the site back to farmland for livestock. The landowner didn't want to keep the quarry's open water, so the innovative idea of mixing on-site peat with a sandy overburden has produced the perfect soil for growing grass and crops. Getting rid of the water was a huge project, which involved digging a 6-metre deep drainage ditch, remodelling the landscape to create farming-friendly dry land, and excavating the peat to create the new soil.
Once we had achieved the desired landform with grading out the silt lagoons and the bund walls, the peat was used to cover the area. It was then ripped and cultivated to combine it in with the sandy substrate to form a soil forming substrate which was suitable for the establishment of grass. I'm really happy with the outcome. There is really no comparison to the situation on site before restoration commenced to what you see now on site.
For the wildlife, small pools designed to encourage invertebrates have enhanced biodiversity on the agricultural land. Tree planting will complete the restoration. The judges called this a difficult site to restore, requiring ingenuity by Tarmac officers to come up with a solution. They say the company has created a landform which sits well within the surrounding countryside. Next, we're with Island Barn Aggregates at Molesey Reservoirs in Surrey, a 50-hectare site beside the River Thames. The restoration here was created in 1997 to enhance the nearby UNESCO Ramsar wetland area and the special protection area for birds. Throughout its working life, ecological, industrial and archaeological features have been retained and restored. An aftercare programme lasting a quarter of a century is now in place. Hedgerows, trees and grassland banks cover the site, with open water and submerged reefs adding to habitats for wildlife. Reed beds and wet woodland have replaced former silt deposits. There's an artificial sand martin nesting face, an otter holt and places for bats to roost. Overwintering birds visit the site to feed on a variety of invertebrates and insects.
We've got a range of habitats on site. We've got the dry grassland banks. There are areas of wet grassland around the lakes, some quite significant areas of reed bed and aquatic margins, valuable species for species of dragonflies, as well as other invertebrates. We've got an area over on the west side of the site which has the former silt lagoons, and that's developed over time as reed beds succeeded by quite a significant wet woodland habitat. It's quite a valuable resource for this part of Surrey, which is quite an urban fringe area and quite built up. It's quite an oasis in the sort of like this suburban location, I think.
This is an important restoration project for the Metropolitan Green Belt, and in the future, walkers on the River Thames long-distance path will be able to visit Molesey. The judges appreciated the challenges facing this site because of the former industrialisation of the land. They think considerable care has been taken to create an area of diverse nature conservation close to the urban area. From the southeast of England, we head north to Yorkshire and Aggregate Industries' Ripon City Sand and Gravel Quarry. Professional advice and working with the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust and the local community has created a diverse mixture of priority habitats.
The work that's gone in, I mean, when you look at the photos from when it was a quarry, and you can even look on Google Earth because it's not been updated yet, and the difference, you know, it's not just the shaping of the lagoons, but the thought that's gone into the topography of it to help minimise flooding, the thought that's gone into the access and viewpoints and stuff. No stone's been left unturned.
Green hay was key here. It was spread across the site to form 6,500 square metres of botanically rich fenland planting, including flowers and plants grown in Yorkshire. 3,000 reed plugs were bought from a local nursery, and 280 metres of hedges were planted alongside the canal reed bed. The site is an important floodplain for the River Ure, and here too that evocative bittern has been booming.
I think that will be the exciting thing about where we're standing at the moment. It won't just be, oh, this is what the quarry left us with. In effect, we've created this green carpet of biodiversity in effect, and it will be really interesting to see how that functions as the water levels change over time and as they function through the seasons.
People are enjoying Ripon. An 11-hectare open water sailing lake has extra slipways, jetties and a boat park. There's a picnic and parking area, especially useful for Ripon races, and a new footpath loop links the River Ure with the Ripon Canal, with screens and hides for walkers to watch the wildlife. The judges called this a very well-researched and implemented restoration scheme with a lot to offer. It's a great asset to the area and open to the public, and the judges say this is a great example for the industry to follow. We're back in Gloucestershire, this time with Hills Quarry Products, to take a look at Shorncote Sand and Gravel Quarry, which is a part of the Cotswold Water Park in the Upper Thames Valley. Shorncote sits alongside a working quarry, and the team says that the wildlife seems to ignore the machinery, and the plant operators have become keen conservationists, fiercely protective of wildlife.
The lakes are very attractive. They attract a wide variety of birds and wildlife, and the beauty of sand and gravel extraction, you know, we've got sand and gravel extraction going on just the other side of this lake here. Wildlife get used to it. They get used to machines moving around, and therefore, you know, we create this habitat that just keeps going and keeps moving with our operation.
The name Shorncote dates back to 1170, and the restoration work has turned this former sewage sludge dump into a first-class home for wildlife. Shorncote has 9 of the water park's 150 lakes and is a haven for wading, migrating, feeding and nesting birds. Murmurations of starling are seen, and back to that bittern, it's thought Shorncote will be the first site in the water park to host breeding bittern and great white egret. Where the quarry has been restored to non-agricultural dry land, the land's been left without topsoil, and those unmanicured areas are loved by the stonechat, kingfisher, sand martin and marsh harrier.
We've got a site which post-extraction restoration is clearly much more valuable in terms of its wildlife interest than the original area of land pre-extraction. So this is actually quite a good example of how you can get net gain, not just for wildlife, but also for people being able to walk around it and view wildlife. So there's community and leisure gains there as well.
The visiting judges say this is a busy leisure site. It has the advantage of being on a landscape scale with a wide variety of uses and habitats, and the judges like that it's highly valued by both nature conservation bodies and the public. Aggregate Industries are working at Venn, a former hardstone and gritstone quarry in North Devon. Here, good relationships and collaboration with local people have helped shape the smooth restoration from working quarry to wildlife haven and eventually eco-resort.
We basically had two quarries, one deep one and one shallow one. There was 500,000 cubic metres of soils that were on site, some rock, some spoil heaps that had to be moved from one quarry to another, and then an import to cap it all off of about 250,000 tonnes of import to cap it all off and restore it.
Newsletters, surveys and open days all contributed ideas which are now being carved into the landscape. Venn will eventually become a world-class multi-million-pound eco-resort with conservation at its heart. It'll create around 100 jobs and is set to inject about £3.9 million a year into the local economy. Already that icon of the air, the peregrine falcon, has returned to Venn, encouraged by strategically placed nesting boxes. Bat roosts have been preserved, and the famous Tarka Trail footpath, named after the otter from Henry Williamson's book Tarka the Otter, has been enhanced by tree planting, which mirrors the trees in the restored quarry. According to the judges, Aggregate Industries have secured a financially viable end use for the quarry by working and communicating with the local community, the planning authority and the developer in an exemplary manner. Our final contender for the Restoration Awards is HANSON and West Knighton, a former sand and gravel quarry in Dorset. This site covers 126 hectares, and the team says if a stranger visited the site, they would never know it had once been a quarry. Here, the restoration of high-grade arable land and grass pasture for dairy cattle has gone hand in hand with woodland and hedgerow planting.
We put into practice a lot of the MAF best practice soil handling guides, and we've actually had some really good succession of digger drivers from the earthworks contractors who really don't get the recognition they deserve. You know, however good the design is, a lot of what happens for good or for bad is actually down to the skill of the digger drivers who are spreading the soils.
Some of the features created by quarrying, but often rare in the countryside, have been retained. Bare ground, hot, dry invertebrate faces, shallow pools and scrapes have created diverse habitats not normally seen in a mainly agricultural landscape. The wetland areas now support a variety of aquatic invertebrates. Great crested newts have been recorded, and the reed beds support scores of breeding birds. It's been a team effort over 20 years at West Knighton, and the digger driver, who worked on the early award-winning phases of this restoration, was at the wheel to complete the final piece of the jigsaw as the access road was reinstated. The judges said it was hard to fault this land as an agricultural restoration, with both the arable and pasture looking in top condition. Yields are improving year on year, hedgerows are mature, and the site ties in well with the surrounding landscape.